Hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Sharmeen Ali. A lot of developments going on across the world today, namely that President Donald Trump has become the third president in the United States history to be impeached. The articles of impeachment were passed by the House of Representatives. He's been impeached by the House of Representatives in the United States for abuse of power. And now shortly after the new year, the case will go to the Senate for a proper trial in which President Trump could either be acquitted or found guilty, in which case he could lose office. And of course, we know that the Senate has a majority of Republicans, and a two-thirds majority is required in order to pass this, to find him guilty. So that is a huge development. Again, it's the third time in the history of the United States a president is being impeached. So also, in the recent United Kingdom elections, we saw how the BJP and RSS had groups that were trying to influence the outcome of the elections in the United Kingdom. And mainly, there were 6 Labour candidates who the BJP groups tried to influence for them to not win the elections. And those 6 candidates all came out winning. Amongst them were Mr. Taranjeet Singh Desi, Preet Kaur Gill. They were all supporters of Khalistan and other MPs as well. All of them won in their respective seats. So we'll be talking about that as well. Also, at the moment, there's a lot of tension in India right now due to the Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Register of Citizens, where now we're seeing all across the country that Hindus, people of all faiths and walks of life, are protesting against this discriminatory bill. And we've seen protests in universities in every city, practically all over India. We're seeing protests, and the heavy-handedness of the police being used in these protests has been criticized by a lot of people, including their celebrities such as Pariniti Chopra and Vicky Kaushal. Shabana Azmi, an actress, has supported the protesters. Also, Arundhati Roy has given a statement supporting the protesters, and a lot of people are actually very upset about the dealing of the citizens, where it is their right to have peaceful protests around the country. Now I'd like to introduce the guests that we have in our studio today with us. We have with us Mr. Imran Jan, who is a United States-based journalist. Thank you so much for joining us, Imran Sahab. Let's begin with President Trump's impeachment. We're going to show a little report on this first, and then we'll have a discussion.
President Donald Trump becomes the third American chief executive to be formally charged under the Constitution's ultimate remedy for high crimes and misdemeanors. President Trump was impeached by the U.S. House of Representatives' historic vote split along party lines. The House of Representatives has passed the impeachment motion against President Donald Trump with the majority of votes. 229 votes were polled in favor of motion, while 197 votes against and 3 abstained. Trump was charged over the abuse of power of his office by enlisting a foreign government to investigate a political rival ahead of the 2020 election. The House was also voting on a charge that he then obstructed Congress in its investigation. Republicans stood by their party's leader, who has frequently tested the bounds of civic norms. Trump called the whole affair a witch hunt, a hoax, and a sham, and sometimes all 3. Republicans argued that Democrats are impeaching Trump because they can't beat him in 2020 election. Trump will now stand trial in the Senate, where his Republicans hold a solid majority and are expected to exonerate him.
So President Trump is now going to be tried in the United States Senate, where there are 53 Republicans, 45 Democrats, and 2 independents, and 67 votes are needed to convict him. So, Mr. Umar, thank you for joining us again in our program. And let's begin and find out what is the likelihood, number one, that this two-thirds majority, the 67 votes that are needed in Senate, are actually going to happen? Is there is there a chance that maybe some of the Republicans will vote in favor of making the president be guilty?
Well, we'll find out, but in my view, least likely. It doesn't look like, I mean, the House of Representatives voted in favor of impeachment, but in the Senate, as you mentioned, it is the Republicans that are in the majority, and as we saw in the vote, even in the House of Representatives, the vote was strictly based on party line. You know, the Democrats voted in favor of the impeachment, and the Republicans said, no, it's just a hoax, which is basically Trump's language, his
He
rhetoric.
said it's a witch hunt. And
Exactly.
he's been
That's
saying
what he
that
said about
throughout.
the Mueller investigation before that. That's what his followers, his supporters actually like that language. So least likely that, you know, come New Year, once the Congress is in session and the voting and the trial starts, actually the impeachment trial starts, it doesn't, the odds are in favor of Trump at the Senate. And
Right.
it doesn't look like he will be impeached, but that's not the point. The point is, for the rest of the world, for as long as he's alive and even after that, that is going to be his legacy now. People will remember him as a president who was impeached, regardless of what happens at the Senate. You know, most likely, like I said, he probably wouldn't be impeached. But again, as you mentioned in the introduction, he's the third president who's impeached.
Yeah.
Andrew Johnson was impeached. Richard Nixon, before impeachment, what was supposed to happen? He resigned. Then Bill Clinton in 1998, and now President Trump. So, I mean, that's not an achievement. That's not something you need on your resume.
Did President Clinton go through his impeachment in his first term or second term?
It was a second term,
The second term,
1998.
okay. So it couldn't affect his next election.
That's
This
right.
is yet to be seen. That if now, what would the scenarios be if both
Oh, the
both
election.
ways? If he wins, I mean, if he's acquitted,
acquitted, yeah.
and if he's, let's start with number one. If he's found guilty, would he be able to still run for the elections in 2020?
No, he will
or
not be.
He will not.
He'll
Okay.
be gone. But most likely, as I said, if he's acquitted, we don't know. I guess we'll find out. But if he's acquitted, America already is a very polarized country right now. There are people who are either pro-Trump or extremely anti-Trump. And with this impeachment, once this is over, people who support Trump will start supporting him even more because they'll start believing in the deep state conspiracy theory that, you know, people are out to remove him from the office.
So you think he'll come back stronger than before?
Most likely he'll win, yeah,
Really?
in my view. People will support him more. His voter base which actually believes in conspiracy theories and watches Fox News and reads his tweets 3 in the morning, they'll start supporting him more, in my view.
Right, and if suppose he was to be found guilty, what alternative does the Republican Party have for a candidate, to run for the president in 2020?
There will be a new election then. I mean, there's once he's gone, things change, and I mean, as I mentioned about Richard Nixon, he had resigned, even though he wasn't a very revered person at the time. But he had some sense of self-respect. He was decent enough to resign. President Trump, I mean, if he has any decency, he should resign. I mean, he should just say, okay, you know what, I should just stand down, but he's not. So to answer your question, we'll find out once that happens, if in the event of his impeachment, if that happens, the country, a lot can happen. A lot of extreme things can happen. And as far as my experience is concerned, living for about a decade in the United States, people are more prone to believing conspiracy theories than people here in this country.
Okay.
So
That's
a lot of extreme things can happen if he's impeached.
right. Now, in the case that if he is found guilty, the other charges that he was facing, for example, in the Mueller investigation, where they couldn't actually charge a president because he was a sitting president, would he then have to face all of those as well in the United States
in the
courts?
Mueller investigation, what happened was that Mueller actually said, Robert Mueller, the special counsel who was also the FBI director before, he actually said, I did not find evidence enough to charge him to say that he's guilty, but I also cannot say that I can exonerate him.
Yeah.
So he was indirectly telling the Congress, I did my job of the investigation. Now it is your job to impeach him based on whatever I have found. So that didn't happen. It's actually funny. Mueller investigation didn't result in his impeachment. His tax evasion didn't result in that. His fraudulent charitable foundation didn't do anything.
And the other scandals as well.
His use of the campaign finance to that pornographic actress didn't do anything. It all had to come down to him asking a foreign leader, President Zelensky, president of Ukraine, that he should find some dirt on Joseph Biden and his son Hunter Biden, so that it could help Trump win the 2020 election, because Joseph Biden the former Vice President of the United States, is a very strong candidate who can potentially beat Donald Trump.
And how about the charges that President Trump has made against Joe Biden? Are those going to be investigated also before the 2020 elections?
No, because those charges, Trump has asked a foreign leader to investigate those charges against Joseph Biden's son, Hunter Biden. Those are not charges that the United States is going to investigate, because that didn't happen inside.
But let me ask you this. Joe Biden, when he was Vice President of the United States, the fact that he may have used his influence
to get his son on the
overseas, internally in the United States, they're not going to look into that at all.
It's a potential conflict of interest when you are in power and you use your power to benefit your family. Right now, there's no talk of that investigation in the United States. The media and everybody else is heavily consumed with what is happening right now, the Trump impeachment and you know, what will happen next.
Okay, so in your opinion, you think that any other Republican nominee in the next elections in 2020, even if it wasn't President Trump, would still have a good chance? Do they have a good chance of winning those elections if he gets found guilty?
Most likely not, because there doesn't exist a strong contender against strong and tall candidates like Joseph Biden or Elizabeth Warren or even Bernie Sanders if he's nominated. So most likely not.
Okay, and how about the Republican Party? After this entire case of impeachment against a president, the third in history, which is very, very serious, and everybody is very solemn about this, even the Democrats, they say that it's a sad time in the United States history. Will the Republican Party actually still want him as their candidate in the 2020 elections?
Yes, the fact that they have come out so much in support of Trump's impeachment in the House of Representatives, and as we will see, even in the Senate, they'll fight this impeachment trial. So the fact that they're doing that, going to such horrible lengths of protecting this man, they'll most likely, of course, let him run rather than someone else.
And he's also been a very controversial president since day one. His brash statements and on social media, etc., and then he's made remarks that were seen as highly racist remarks, etc. And then also his day-to-day activities in the White House, a lot of things coming out over there. So your comments on that, please.
Well, I mean, he has been a controversial and a very, I would say, unique president, sometimes in good ways and most of the time in bad ways. For example, he had several secretaries of state. Even if you look at this issue right now, what is actually causing this impeachment is him asking a foreign leader to investigate a potential Democratic rival. Now, in order to do all that, the man in charge, the man Trump put in charge was Rudy Giuliani, who's actually his personal lawyer. He's not the Secretary of State of the United States. So the Secretary of State of the United States didn't know anything about what was happening, or maybe was privy to some information that was there, but it was actually Rudy Giuliani who was conducting shadow foreign policy in the dark, only catering to President Trump's needs, not the needs of the United States of America as a country. So that is one example of a very unorthodox, or I shouldn't say unorthodox, I should say bizarre practice of the American presidency. And of course, there are many other things, as I mentioned, the fact that he used campaign finance. Campaign finance, when you announce you want to run for office, the money you get from supporters or super PACs, that money is supposed to be spent only on your vacation. $130,000 of that money Trump paid to one of his ex-girlfriends, who also happens to be a film star in the adult industry. That itself is a very immoral thing to do. And I'm still surprised that that doesn't register much of a blip on the radar of the American media. Although it's definitely a major issue. Like I said, it's a violation of the campaign finance laws. Why is that not driving the impeachment process? As I mentioned, somehow it came down to him asking a foreign leader to meddle in the American democracy, in American elections.
And this is President Vladimir Zelensky, who's the president of the Ukraine, and there was $391 million of military aid at stake for him to investigate.
Yeah, on that
Vice President Biden's son.
There was a half-an-hour phone call between Trump and President Zelensky, and the exact words were, Trump said, well, we need you to do us a favor, though. It was a quid pro quo. You can define Nixon presidency by one word, that would be Watergate. Clinton, Monica Lewinsky. President Trump, quid pro quo. These words, this is exactly what he asked President Zelensky to do, basically hinting that as Michael Cohen, one of his lawyers who's now in jail, he had said in his testimony in Congress that President Trump actually speaks in code. He doesn't tell you, like for example, he's not going to say, I need that pen. He's just going to hint at it. He's going to make you realize that he's in need of a certain thing. And that's what he did with President Zelensky by basically hinting to his need, which was that for Zelensky to investigate Hunter Biden, who was a board member of that energy company in Ukraine, and basically said that if you do that for us, we will release the $391 million defense aid money that you need so you can buy arms and be a and also Zelensky needed a one-on-one meeting in the White House with Donald Trump so that he could show it to his people and he could show it to Russia that after all, we're not weak enough for you to do something to us because we have the United States backing us symbolically. So there was a quid pro quo. There was so that is another example of his very weird and bizarre practice of the American presidency.
Right. Basically, we also see that he's been a very unconventional and at times, like you're saying, maybe an unethical president as the U.S. Public has seen it. However, there are certain things that go in his favor for the next elections as well. The economy, for example. Any comments of yours on that?
That's right. Many jobs have been created. I don't have the exact statistics, but yes, the job situation, the economy situation is a lot better than before. Also, I want to say that one thing that somehow we all miss about Donald Trump, which in my view is a very good thing about him, is that can you name one country that he has invaded? That itself is a very unprecedented practice of of the US presidency. Obama, Bush, Clinton, Reagan, you can go all the back all the way to
We're going to come back to this discussion. At the moment, we've got online with us Begum Abida Hussain, who's a former ambassador to the United States online. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us online.
It's a pleasure.
Ma'am, thank you for joining us on PTV World.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I would like to ask you that, having served in the United States, you're very familiar with the way things happen over there. Now, President Trump has been impeached and he's going to have his trial in the Senate early next year. Ma'am, what is your input about this? This is highly unusual. We saw it in President Clinton's time earlier. And in our generation, we've never seen it before. President Johnson was a very, very long time ago. And it's highly unusual. What do you think the future of the upcoming elections is going to be in the United States next year?
The impeachment process is very complicated. And although the process will be underway, but I don't really see it being completed. And I think that President Trump has a reasonably outstanding chance of being re-elected for a second term.
Right. Okay, and we were just discussing in the event that, he's going to get through this. So he's still going to be wanted by the Republican Party as their candidate despite this mark of impeachment being on him?
I think so. I think the Republicans don't really have another candidate. There's no prominent challenger to President Trump within the Republican Party. And the Democrats have yet to decide their candidature. So this gives President Trump a head start. Of course, the election is always fraught with uncertainty, and we won't know until September, October of next year what the lay of the land is. But on the face of it, for the time being, it seems President Trump has a good chance of being re-elected.
Right, ma'am, and we were just discussing with our guest in the studio how there are some things that, okay, he's been a controversial president, he's done certain unconventional things, but he's also done a lot of things that the citizens in the United States and in the world think were right. For example, pulling out of foreign wars, at least his attempt to do so in Afghanistan, and his criticism of the Iraq war even before he was elected as president. There are a lot of things that are in his favor, including the U.S. economy. Your feedback on that, ma'am?
Yes, people tend to vote with their pocket. And the U.S. economy has done reasonably well under President Trump. So this is one of the main reasons why he would be re-elected if he is re-elected.
Right, but there have also been other issues, for example, the trade war with China, and we're seeing that there's some sort of settlement with that right now.
Yes, the trade war with China is a hot topic, but I don't think that that is an impediment as far as the election is concerned.
Right. And ma'am, as far as his somewhat racist remarks in the beginning of his presidency, sometimes you still hear him say those very harsh terms, radical Islamic terrorism. Prime Minister Imran Khan has been at the UN General Assembly and he's addressed this, and he said there is no different Islam, there's just one, and there are extremists in every religion. And yet we saw him repeat this again recently. It seemed like that Islamophobic, racist sort of approach of his kind of mellowed down for a while. What is your opinion on this, ma'am?
Well, as you say, he mellowed down. He started with the anti-Muslim bias, but then he realized that he has to do business with the Muslim world and extensive business at that. So he changed his tune and moderated his earlier statements.
Right, exactly. Thank you so much, Madam Abda Hussain, for joining us on the program. We're going to have a short break right now. We'll be back and discuss more of our topics after the break. Stay with us, please.
Of the Masjid al-Haram, the Grand
Hello and welcome back. Now, the Indian government's attempts to influence the elections, the recent elections in the United Kingdom, and to influence against 6 of the Labour MPs that actually ended up winning, it actually failed. Their attempt to influence the elections failed. Now, the BJP and the RSS had 3 front organizations: the British Hindu and Indian Votes Matter, the Conservative Friends of India, and Overseas Friends of BJP. These organizations were working together to influence the United Kingdom elections. Now, we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail with Mr. Hamid Khan, who's a senior journalist. He's with us on Skype. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
My pleasure, Sharmeen.
So, sir, your feedback about this, the attempt of the BJP and RSS to actually influence the outcome of the United Kingdom elections, and they've actually failed because 2 of the British Sikh MPs that they were targeting, Mr. Taranjeet Singh Desi and Preet Kaur Gill, among others, they won in their constituencies.
Yeah. Actually, what Sharmeen happening is India tried to play the typical, like a dirty politics tried to intervene in UK politics the same way what they are doing in India. But I mean, the situation is not similar in India and Pakistan. The politics and the dynamics of the politics are different than the UK politics. But what happened in this election, particularly when Mr. Jeremy Corbyn, openly said after the revocation of Article 275 by India and 35A that there should be right of self-determination and there should be plebiscite for the Kashmir. And that made like BJP and the people, who are friends of BJP, that made them think, oh, if BJP, Jeremy Corbyn comes in power, and like his stance is very, I should say, very clear, very democratic stance he took, and they started with targeting almost 48 seats where they thought they can make a difference with Hindu votes, especially against Labour constituencies where there was, very high chances of the Labour seats to be won. And then they organized, a very, I should say, drastic campaign against Jeremy Corbyn, against Labour. And then, as you said, they launched a campaign against these 2 Sikh candidates. They were in favor of Khalistan. So actually what they were trying to do is, they were trying to, I should say, differentiate. They were trying to make a Hindu community apart. And they didn't understand that when elections are going on in Britain, the people of Britain, wherever they are from, whatever their background is, they are more concerned with the local politics. And when we talk about Indian votes, we need to understand there is very much majority of Indian Muslims as well in the voting. And this was the whole, campaign against the Labour MPs, and they were emphasizing that the Hindu voters should not vote to the Labour because Labour is saying for the right of self-determination. And I should say that at this time again, the voters in Britain, they showed sense. They were there, and it was completely disaster for the BJP in these results. None of the seats they could make a difference. Whatever the seats that they targeted, as you mentioned, especially about 6 constituencies, they were clearly won by the Labour. And then the 2 seats they targeted the people who were in favor of Khalistan. Mr. Desai, he got very famous for his turban, first Sikh with turban in Parliament. So he has his own, following all over, not over in his constituency. He has his own following in England as well. He's been appreciated for talking about rights for Kashmiris. He's been appreciated for talking about rights of Sikhs. He's been appreciated all over England. Same, I would say, in north of England, we have seen, Naz Shah. She's a very loud voice for Kashmiris. And she was talking about Kashmiris in parliament. She was talking about Kashmiris in public speeches. So that was, I should say, that was a complete failure. And India should learn a lesson from this, what they tried to do, intervening the British politics. It is not that easy. And I would appreciate the sense of the Hindu voters. I would appreciate the sense of Indian voters, where they they understood and they went with the right politics. They did
Right,
not get
here
influenced
I'd
by
like to
this
ask
false
you,
propaganda.
Mr. Hamid Khan, here I'd like to ask you one thing before I go to my studio guest, that the constituencies in the United Kingdom where these influences were aimed at, the Asian communities there tend to be a little bit more integrated. You have a lot of different diverse Asian populations together, right? So it's not like
Exactly.
you just have Hindus voting for Hindu candidates. You have all of these different Asian candidates representing a large portion of Asians.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the British culture. That is the beauty of voting and living in the UK. That it's a very diverse society. And when it comes to the election, 90% of the voters, I would still say that they don't look at who is the candidate. They don't get biased with their ethnicity or with their background. Main concern in British election is the policy and who's the heading the party. If somebody is ideologically with a conservative or Tory party, they will vote for Tories. They will not think that, oh, this time it's not like Hindu candidate or this time it's a Pakistani candidate. They will not make a difference with it. But this is the beauty. And if they are with the Labour Party, they will vote for Labour. We have seen that this is the first time in British Parliament, House of Commons, that there are 30, elected members from the ethnic minorities, which means every 10th candidate is non-British, non-ethnic, from the other ethnicity other than the British. So which is a very great thing and which shows the diversity of the British nation. And we have
Right,
seen when it comes
absolutely.
to elections, they don't win, like Pakistanis or Indians, they don't win the election just because there is Pakistani or Indian voters are there. They get the votes from the local white people there as well. That's
Right.
how they won
Please
and
stay with
secured
us.
their seat.
Right. Please stay with us, Mr. Hamid Khan. And Imran Sahab, now I'd like you to just give your input in this as well. We're seeing how a large number of Pakistani British candidates won in the United Kingdom. This is the first time about 70 of them got tickets from the Conservative and Labour parties and the other parties as well. You see a huge representation of Muslims and Pakistanis in the UK Parliament. How can that be improved in the United States as well?
Well, it could be improved in the United States primarily through the role of lobbying. Pakistanis living in the United States, and I always say this, they don't lobby as much as the Indians do. So lobbying is one way to do that. At the same time, how many people of Pakistani origin do we know who work in the US media? I don't know anyone. Perhaps there's somebody out there, but not that I know of. Fareed Zakaria, who is an American of Indian origin, he is working on the leading American news channel CNN, doing one of their major shows, and
Time Magazine as well.
And writes for Time Magazine and Washington Post. A few things that I know about him is that he plagiarized so many times, and each time he just apologized and he was reinstated back on CNN and Washington Post. Every time he's conducting a show or writing a piece, even if it's irrelevant or remotely related to Pakistan, he brings in Pakistan in it and makes his criticism. I personally, like I said, do not know anyone who's on the media who advocates for Pakistan, or Muslims for that matter. So that is another way. I just want to comment on what the gentleman on the TV, on Skype call said. So Modi's party is right-wing. Labour Party in England is left-wing. And many of their politicians always advocated for a free Kashmir and for Khalistan, which is what the Sikhs in India demand for an independent state. And India, that is why, just to simplify, India was trying very hard to influence the British elections, as the gentleman mentioned. I just want to say one thing here. It was a few years ago, I guess 2013 or 14, there was an Economist magazine. And on the cover paper, there was a picture in which a cat is sitting on a chair looking in a mirror, but in the mirror it sees a lion. And the caption was something like, does India think it's a superpower? So my question would be, from India would be, you have millions and millions of people sleeping on the streets. They are dying of hunger. They are naked. What do you think? You're some really strong country who would go and influence British elections and export your dirt from India, the right-wing extremist racist-laden dirt from India all the way to England and influence their elections. So just so you can have your nonsense influence in this region, it's not going to work like that. And you actually bring out a very important issue. The United States is a major superpower, and whatever happens there has many influence, much influence abroad. And so people of Pakistani origin, people who believe, they could be of any origin, people who believe in the rights of other people around the world, like the Palestinians and like the Kashmiris, to live in a free and independent state and not live in an open-air prison, which is what Kashmir and Palestine are. They should advocate, they should write about it, they should speak about it, they should join
be more involved.
these lobbying groups and be active.
This is something I found when I lived in the United States for a good 12 years. I found that people there, the Pakistani Muslim diaspora, are just a bit cut off and they're not involved in mainstream
they're
politics.
Only doing business, they're only making money
and
activities, driving BMWs.
And whereas when I was studying in the United Kingdom, that was a good number of years as well, I found that the people there, the people of Asian, Muslim, Pakistani descent, Kashmiri descent, they're very active in their country and everything that's going on. And now we're seeing the results of that. So
and they should be more active in the US, which is where you can make an impact more than in the UK. That's where you make a big impact,
absolutely. So that has always been a concern of mine. Now moving on to the next topic we'll be discussing with both our guests is that the criticism of the protests in India and the way they've been handled, actually not the criticism of the protests themselves, but the way they've been handled by the Indian police, the heavy-handedness that we're seeing, and which is a huge contrast to what we saw recently in Pakistan, where you had peaceful protests, and which is a right of every citizen, and they were conducted so peacefully. They came and went peacefully. The Islamabad administration, police handled everything very professionally. Not a single stone was touched or hurt. Whereas you're seeing right now in India nationwide protests going on about the Citizen Amendment Act. Finally, the Hindus have started speaking up, the whole nation has started speaking up, many of their members of the Congress, Parliament have started speaking up, and now the celebrities are also speaking up. They were extremely quiet, deafeningly silent when Article 370 and 35A were revoked in Kashmir. Nobody said anything at that time, but now that with this new bill, Citizen Amendment Act, as well as the National Register of Citizens and proving your citizenship, now we're seeing a lot of protests, and we're also seeing the result of that. We're seeing the Indian police going and they're beating the students of these universities. Jamia Millia Islamia, for example, in Delhi, were beaten with wooden sticks, and those students came out with broken hands and legs and feet. It was just awful, and it was very, very disturbing to see. And the rest of the whole nation, we're seeing heavy-handedness, tear gas being fired into the libraries of these universities, and also you're seeing pellet guns being used. Many people have gone in with gunshot wounds from the Indian police. So now finally the public and the celebrities in India are beginning to speak up about this. So let me get your comments on this, Mr. Hamid Khan, please. That now you're seeing a reaction from the Indian public, and luckily that is so. However, it's very, very saddening to see what's happening in these protests. Hamid Khan Saab, your feedback, please.
Thank you. Sharmeen, it shows the tolerance level of the Indian government, and it shows that under this new, right wing, it's extreme right wing party ruling India at the moment in shape of BJP, which is following RSS ideology. And they have only one agenda, and that is the dominance of Hinduism. And they want to demolish Muslim identity all over. First they tried within Kashmir, now they're trying to do it all over India. This CAB bill, this is Citizen Amendment Bill, it is absolutely inhuman. It is against all the human rights. We have seen that United Nations has condemned it, and Amnesty International has condemned it, and all these protests are very democratic rallies where they started tear gas, they started straight away, police fired to the students, and they went to the Millia University where they went. Do you know the history of that university? That the biggest supporter of India, a Muslim supporter, Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad, was affiliated to that university. So this is where it comes that Mr. Jinnah's two-nation theory was right. And that's what it is the message to the whole of Indian Muslims now, that at that time Mr. Jinnah was right. There has to be division, and now there
Right.
is a
Thank you
zero
so
tolerance
much.
shown by the BJP government. And
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Hamid Khan, for joining us online now. Pariniti Chopra said that if this is what's going to happen every time a citizen expresses their view, forget CAB, we should pass a bill and not call our country a democracy anymore. Beating up innocent human beings for speaking their mind, barbaric. And Vicky Kaushal said, what is happening is not okay. The way it's happening is not okay. People have every right to peacefully voice their opinion. This violence and disruption is both saddening and concerning as a fellow citizen. In no circumstance must our faith in democracy be shaken. So we're seeing the country is, that the country is really divided right now in what's going on with this new Citizen Amendment Act, and there's an uproar in the whole country. Now, my major concern is, Imran Sahab, I'd like to ask you about this as a final question because we're running out of time, is Prime Minister Imran Khan has warned that, at any point when things get out of hand in India, there could be a false flag operation which the Indian government might try and conduct against Pakistan just to divert attention from what's happening in these protests. We're seeing this now increase build-up going on. And what are the chances that this can happen right now? Because, there's always a blame on Pakistan for something or the other. This is something that if they were to make some kind of action like that with Pakistan, that could unite India again. So do you think that there's a possibility of that?
It is very likely, and Modi has a history. Every time he makes a mistake, he makes a blunder. One of the most effective ways in any nation, and especially in India, is to rally the people around the flag. Claim. I wouldn't be surprised personally if there's some sort of a skirmish that India would initiate with the border at the border with Pakistan, because that would divert the attention away from what is happening in India right now toward this issue of, oh, Pakistan is attacking us again, and we need to come together for a united, strong India against.
So we need to be very watchful about that. Thank you so much again for joining us, Mr. Imran Jan. And that's all the time, unfortunately, that we have for our program today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Newsroom.